When it comes to Donkey Kong Country, the villains are just as much a part of the series' identity as the Kongs themselves are. King K. Rool, the original antagonist, casts a very long shadow. With his cartoonish flair, his wild costume changes, and his design in general, he's the quintessential video game villain. But in 2014, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze introduced a new kind of foe, one who was quieter, colder, but every bit as menacing: Lord Frederick. As the leader of the Snowmads, Frederick doesn't just attack Donkey Kong and his family, he freezes their entire world. This isn't just a simple theft or personal grudge. It's an invasion on a massive scale, with Frederick acting as both a conqueror and a reflection of the harsh environment the Kongs must now survive. Despite this, Frederick is often dismissed as the poor man's K. Rool or forgettable. This video is going to argue that Frederick is far from a generic stand-in. In fact, to me, he is one of the most thematically cohesive and visually striking villains that Nintendo themselves has ever created. To fully appreciate his character, though, I want to explore his design, his role in the story, his very unique presence, and his unforgettable boss battle at the end of the game. By the end, I hope you'll see why Lord Frederick deserves so much more recognition, not just as a Donkey Kong villain, but as a standout antagonist in gaming. Frederick and the Snowmads make their entrance in the most impactful opening sequence in the entire franchise. The game begins with a celebration. Donkey Kong is enjoying his birthday with his family, a moment of warmth and levity, but that calm is shattered when the Snowmad fleet finally arrive. This isn't a subtle incursion. The Snowmads descend on Donkey Kong Island like a storm, bringing with them an otherworldly cold. Frederick himself signals the invasion by blowing his massive horn, summoning a supernatural blizzard that freezes the entire island in an instant. The bright tropical paradise is transformed into an icy wasteland, setting the stage for the game's journey. This moment establishes Frederick as a different kind of villain. K. Rool's antics are often personal and humorous. He steals bananas, kidnaps friends, and dresses up in silly costumes. But Frederick's approach, by contrast, is colder, both literally and figuratively. His invasion feels calculated, almost impersonal, as though he's asserting dominance simply because he can. The scale of Frederick's ambition is also worth noting. He's not just targeting the Kongs, he's conquering their entire homeland. This sets him apart from many other villains in the series, who often focus on individual acts of revenge or theft. Frederick's goals are grander, making him feel like a true conqueror rather than a petty antagonist. One of my favorite things about Frederick, and what makes him stand out from many other Nintendo villains, is his silence. Unlike K. Rool, who thrives on theatrics and loud expressions, Frederick is very reserved. He doesn't taunt the Kongs or engage in over-the-top antics. Instead, he lets his actions speak for him. His stoicism gives Frederick a unique kind of power. In many ways, his silence mirrors the environment he commands. The icy landscapes of Tropical Freeze are unforgiving and quiet, with an almost eerie stillness. Frederick embodies this tone, making him feel like a natural extension of the world rather than a separate character. However, this is not to say that Frederick lacks personality, not at all. His design, his movements, and actions convey plenty of character. He's very regal and commanding, yet his horn and exaggerated attacks hint at a subtle playfulness. He doesn't need to yell or perform slapstick humor to make an impression. His mere presence is enough to dominate the screen. Frederick's design is one of the most deliberate and cohesive in the entire series. As the leader of the Snowmads, he embodies the Viking aesthetic they all share. His horned helmet, fur cape, and icy blue palette give him a very stoic, warlord-like appearance, someone who should be feared. Choosing a walrus as the villain is an inspired choice for sure. Walruses are massive, powerful creatures, but they're not traditionally seen as threatening. This makes Frederick's transformation into a fearsome conqueror all the more striking. He's both familiar and unexpected, blending natural power with an otherworldly aura. Frederick's design also reinforces the game's themes. Tropical Freeze, at its roots, is a game about survival and adaptation in the face of harsh conditions, and Frederick represents the pinnacle of that harshness. He's not just a character, he is a true manifestation of this invading cold, unrelenting environment that the Kongs must overcome. Frederick's role as a leader is amplified by the Snowmads, my second favorite enemy faction in the series, after the Kremlings, of course. From their Viking-inspired designs to their icy attacks, the Snowmads feel very unique and like an extension of Frederick himself. Each type of enemy reflects the Snowmad theme. From the mischievous penguins to the burly walruses, this unification makes the Snowmads feel like a real army rather than just a light, random collection of enemies. And as their leader, Frederick feels all the more powerful. He feels like he's in every part of the game, even when he's not physically there, because of obviously the invading ice and the cold and the snow and the island you have to take back from them. He doesn't just feel like a boss fight. He is the sole reason this army exists and the driving force behind this invasion. At the end of the game, Frederick's boss fight is the culmination of everything that Tropical Freeze has built up to, and is actually my favorite boss fight in the franchise. The battle takes place in a massive icy arena, with Frederick towering over the Kongs. His size and strength are immediately intimidating, but what makes the fight so engaging is how dynamic it is. Frederick's attacks are very different and varied and challenging and unpredictable. He'll summon smaller Snowmad troops, unleash massive ice blasts, and even roll into a ball, bouncing around the arena in a way that forces you to constantly adapt, much like the overarching theme of the story of this game, having to adapt. Each phase of the fight escalates the tension, testing your reflexes and your understanding of the game's mechanics. But what makes this battle so satisfying is how it ties into the game's themes. Just as the Kongs, like I said, have had to endure the harsh conditions that Frederick has imposed on them, the fight requires perseverance and precision to get through it. Defeating him feels like a true triumph, not just over a boss, but over the entire icy world that he represents. So, why doesn't Lord Frederick get the credit that he deserves? Part of it comes down to legacy. Rool has been a mainstay of the series since his inception, appearing in multiple games with increasingly elaborate schemes. Frederick, on the other hand, has only appeared in Tropical Freeze. There's also the fact that Frederick's personality is a lot more subtle and more subdued and less extravagant and flamboyant. He doesn't have Rool's charm or slapstick charisma, which can make him seem less memorable at first glance, but that completely misses the point of Lord Frederick. Frederick isn't trying to be Rool. He's a very different kind of villain, one whose strength lies in his presence alone and thematic cohesion rather than his theatrics. Lord Frederick is, without a doubt, the most underrated villain out of all the Donkey Kong Country games, in my opinion, and it's not even a competition. He may not have the same legacy as Rool, but that doesn't make him any less significant. In many ways, he's the perfect villain for Tropical Freeze. He perfectly embodies the game's themes of adaptation, survival, resilience, and overcoming insurmountable odds. Frederick is a conqueror, a leader, and a force of nature. His icy demeanor, his Viking-inspired design, and commanding presence make him one of the most unique villains in this whole series. And I absolutely understand people wanting Rool to come back. I want Rool to come back. I think if and hopefully when they make Donkey Kong Country 6, they should title it The Return of Rool, or Rool Returns, or something like that, because bringing him back would truly rejuvenate this franchise and give it a much needed boost. I think the Snowmads are a huge step up in terms of character design and just villain presence over the Tiki Tak tribe, and it just irks me to see how many people hate Frederick just because he is simply not Rool. So, I ask you, please, next time you revisit Tropical Freeze, take a moment to appreciate the brilliance that is Lord Frederick. He may not be loud or flashy, but his impact is absolutely undeniable. And in the frosty halls of Tropical Freeze, he truly reigns supreme.